There is a belief that most successful entrepreneurs carry at some point in their career. The belief that having enough money, enough profile, enough name recognition makes you untouchable. This leads many to dismiss the banking, that in the unilateral termination of a banking relationship without warning or transparent jurisdiction as a risk that totally affects the little guy. In the last 2 years, 4 of the most recognizable individuals in the Western world have had their accounts closed without warning. One of them is the most powerful person on the planet right now. If it happened to them, the question is not whether it can happen to you. The question is what you have in place for when it does. I'm Matteo Maglia, Partnership Manager at GloboBanks, the banking introduction company for international entrepreneurs. Every week, we sit with clients who tell us some version of the same thing. At my level, this is not a real risk. What follows is why we push back on that every single time. Let's start with the case that blew the door wide open. Nigel Farage is one of the most recognizable political figures Britain has produced in the last 20 years. He is the person most credited with driving Brexit forward. Not a small client, not a low-profile individual. The bank that closed this account is Coates, the private bank of the British royal family, with minimum deposits in the 7 figures, the kind of institution that is supposed to be above these sort of things. When Farage received the closure letter, the reason given was straightforward. A commercial decision, his balance had fallen below the minimum, the kind of explanation that sounds reasonable and that you can't really challenge. Then the internal document leaked, an internal dossier of 40 pages produced by the Coates Reputational Risk Committee, which evaluated Farage's political views as inconsistent with the bank's inclusive values, citing specifically his positions on Brexit and immigration. The FCA opened a formal investigation into how banks evaluate clients based on political opinions. A parliamentary inquiry followed. The reason this case opened so many conversations is that it was the first time anyone had written internal proof that a bank had given one reason for closing an account while having completely different real reason on paper. If you believe that being a leader in the tech or fintech space grants you a pass, the next case will make you rethink that entirely. Jack Mallers runs Strike, one of the most prominent Bitcoin payment companies in the world. His business operates legally, cooperates with regulators, and has institutional backing and visibility that most founders never reach. None of that made a difference. JPMorgan Chase closed his accounts and sent him a letter. The letter cited unspecified concerning activity under the Bank Secrecy Act, which is a legal formulation that sounds like an explanation but contains almost no actual information. When Mollers pressed for specifics, the bank's written response was, "We aren't allowed to tell you." He held onto that letter for 2 months before going public, apparently hoping that working through legal channels would produce something more concrete, but it didn't. What made this case significant beyond Mullers himself is what came out after a disclosure did. A House Financial Service Committee investigation confirmed into a 50-page report that more than 120 crypto hedge funds has been systematically debanked over 3 years through a coordinated pressure campaign by federal regulators. Mullers wasn't an isolated case. It was the case visible enough to become a news story. Before the third case, which is the one that makes this argument impossible to dismiss, the link in the description goes to our initial consultation with our team. We look at your current banking setup and tell you honestly where your exposure is. No commitment, not pitch, come back after. This is the case that ends the argument. What happened when the first meetings this wall isn't an entrepreneur, but the President of the United States? In January 2025, Donald Trump was on stage with the CEO of Bank of America, and there, in front of a live global audience, Trump confronted him directly. He accused Bank of America of systematically closing accounts of conservative clients for non-financial reasons and said he had heard it personally from business owners. Bank of America's response was the standard language that every debanked client receives. internal risk procedures, no comment on individual client relationship. The most powerful person in the world on a global stage calling out a major bank by name, and the bank responds with the same form letter language you get when you call their customer service line. The point here is not the political dimension of it, the point is the dynamic. Even at that level of power and visibility, the answer is still nothing. No explanation, no reversal, no accountability. Just the same wall that anyone else hits when a bank decides it's done with you. The last case is the most instructive of the four, precisely because the person at the center of it is not famous. Frederick Baldan is a former Belgian lobbyist who filed a criminal complaint against European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in the Fitzgerald case. The case centers on undisclosed messages between von der Leyen's and Pfizer CEO during the negotiation of a vaccine contract worth approximately 35 billion euros. Baldan filed his complaint through legal channels as a private citizen, as he was entitled to do. Shortly after his complaint became publicly known, two Belgian banks, ING and Nigel Farage, closed every account he held. His personal account, his consulting firm's account, his household accounts, and the saving account of his 5-year-old son. A formal parliamentary question was submitted to the European Parliament. Both banks issued the same standard internal policy response. The EU Commission stated this has no information suggesting any link to Baldan's activities. He was not under the investigation, his finances had not changed, the only new element in his profile was a legal complaint he had filed against a sitting EU Commission President. And here is why this case carries more weight than the other three. Farage made a national scandal of it. Trump challenged the bank CEO on live television. Mueller had a US senator speaking for him. Baldan had none of that. He was a private citizen who did something illegal and found himself without a bank account, quietly, without a senator, without a global platform, without a CEO resigning over it. That is much closer to what it looks like for most people. What connects all four cases across four completely different countries and professional profiles is not the reason given. The reason is never given, not really. What connects them in the same outcome. No concrete explanation, no meaningful warning, no appeal that actually changed anything. There is also a reason worth nothing. In several of these cases, the public visibility that someone true would protect them is exactly what flagged them. Reputational risk is how banks describe a client who is expensive to defend. Not because of what they did financially, but because of what they represent publicly. Being too visible in the wrong direction makes the calculation flip. For an entrepreneur without a public platform, the outcome is structurally simple. There is no scandal, no press cycle, no senator, it just happens. The protection is not being important enough to be untouchable. No one is. The protection is architecture, specifically banking distributed across multiple accounts, multiple institutions and multiple jurisdictions, built so that the forced closure of any single account does not stop you from operating, accessing your capital or paying your obligations. Switzerland for wealth preservation and reference value, Singapore for third continent geographic separation, the United States for dollar-denominated operations, Panama for a USD layer outside European regulatory reach. When one account closes for any reason, stated or not, the rest of the structure continues. That is what genuine resilience looks like in a banking context, and it is the only thing that actually works when a bank decides, for whatever reason it may or may not disclose, that you are no longer worth the compliance costs. This is the structural GloboBanks bid for clients at this level, through 60 plus banking partners across 15 plus jurisdictions with over 600 accounts opened to date. Our introduction model means clients arrive at a name and relationship manager, not a compliance algorithm, that changes how a profile is evaluated before any automatic decision gets made. The link in the description goes to a free initial consultation. In that call, we map your current banking setup, identify which operational function runs through a single institution, and tell you honestly where your exposure is. If your structure is already solid, we will tell you that. If it has a single point of failure, it is better to know now than to become the fifth case in a video like this one.